A lioness has not moved in 11 minutes. Her ribs rise and fall in slow, shallow breaths, low enough in the grass that the herd she is watching, 80 meters away, has stopped registering her as a threat at all. That is the most dangerous position her body can hold, perfectly still, perfectly loaded, waiting on one particular animal at the edge of the group. She is not watching the herd. She is watching the one member of it that has drifted furthest from the others, because distance from the group, more than size or speed, is usually what decides which individual a predator commits to. This exact moment, one predator, one target, one decision about to be made in the next few seconds, is happening somewhere on this planet right now. It never really stops. Every animal alive today, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, is alive because, so far, it has taken in more energy than it has spent trying to survive. Miscalculate badly enough, even once, and that ends. That single rule does not care what continent enforces it. It applies in the deepest part of the ocean, more than 4 kilometers down, where sunlight has never once reached. It applies on desert ground that has not felt rain in living memory, and on ice that never fully melts, even in the height of summer. Over the next 3 hours, this film follows that rule across 6 of the most demanding environments on Earth, through the lives of 30 animals that have each found a different way to obey it. Some hunt for a living. Some spend their entire lives trying not to be found. A few have stopped competing with another species altogether, building a partnership so complete that neither one still functions properly without the other. And a handful live somewhere so extreme that the ordinary rules of energy on this planet, rules built almost entirely around sunlight, do not even apply to them. Every one of their stories, though, begins the same way every story on Earth begins, with energy arriving from somewhere, and a living thing trying to capture it before something else does. On the savannah, that story is about to play out in its oldest, plainest form. The lioness's stillness finally breaks. She covers the last stretch of grass in under 3 seconds, but 3 seconds is a long time for an animal that has spent its entire life listening for exactly this kind of movement. The nearest wildebeest breaks first, and the herd scatters outward in every direction at once, which is, on its own, a defense. Behavioral ecologists call it the confusion effect. A lioness can commit to chasing only one moving target, not 12. She locks onto hers, loses ground on the turn, and the wildebeest disappears into the dust with the rest of the herd. This is the ordinary outcome here, not the exception. Even a healthy, experienced lioness fails to make a kill far more often than she succeeds when hunting alone. It is a detail that rarely survives in retellings of savanna life, since failure does not make for a dramatic highlight, but it is the actual, average texture of predator life on these plains, and it explains almost everything else about how this ecosystem is built. Grass converts sunlight into usable energy more efficiently than almost any other plant structure on Earth, but even at its best, that conversion only ever captures a small fraction of the light hitting it. A wildebeest that eats that grass keeps an even smaller fraction of the energy stored inside it. Most of what it eats goes toward keeping its own heart beating and its own muscles moving, not toward growing extra tissue for something else to eat later. By the time that original sunlight reaches a lion's muscles, it has been taxed at every single step along the way. On average, only around 10% of the energy available at one level of a food chain makes it into the bodies of the animals at the level above it. That is why an ecosystem able to support well over 1 million wildebeest supports only a few thousand lions. Energy does not disappear as it moves up a food chain, but it becomes sharply, mathematically rarer. That scarcity is also why cooperation matters so much to lions specifically. A solitary hunt, like the one just described, succeeds unpredictably. When two or more lionesses work together instead, one driving prey toward others already in position, their combined success rate rises sharply, especially against animals too large or too dangerous for one lion to safely take on alone, such as a full-grown buffalo. The trade-off is that a kill now has to feed more mouths instead of one. Every hunting strategy on this planet, underneath whatever drama surrounds it, is really a negotiation between efficiency and risk. The wildebeest that escaped today will face those same odds again tomorrow, and the day after that, for the rest of its life. For an animal like this, survival was never about any single individual avoiding risk forever. It is about enough individuals surviving enough of these encounters to reproduce, and wildebeest have built much of their life cycle around tilting that probability in the herd's favor rather than any one animal's. The migration wildebeest are best known for is not a single, coordinated plan. It is millions of individual animals responding to the same environmental cue. Wherever recent rain has fallen, grass grows fastest and holds the most protein, and wildebeest track that shifting pattern across roughly 1,000 kilometers of open country every year. Their arrival on the southern plains, timed to the short rains that make the grass their most nutritious, is not a coincidence. It lines up, generation after generation, with the exact weeks when hundreds of thousands of calves are born, almost all of them within the same narrow window. Biologists call the strategy behind this predator swamping, or dilution. When this many vulnerable calves appear at once, no population of predators, however large, can physically eat more than a small fraction of them. An individual calf's odds of surviving its first days have very little to do with its own strength or speed, and almost everything to do with how many other calves happen to be born around the same time. That same seasonal abundance, along with the carcasses left behind by every successful and unsuccessful hunt on these plains, sustains one of the savanna's most misunderstood predators. Spotted hyenas carry a reputation, built largely by decades of film and television, as cowardly scavengers that let braver animals do the actual hunting. The research says something close to the opposite. Most of a spotted hyena clan's diet comes from animals the clan killed itself, often through long, coordinated group chases capable of bringing down prey many times the size of a single hyena. Scavenging is a real part of their strategy, but it is a supplement, not the main method, and a clan will defend a kill, including from lions, far more often than popular imagination gives them credit for. That hunting success depends on a social structure more complex than almost any other carnivores. A single hyena clan can include 70 or more individuals, organized around a strict, inherited female hierarchy. A cub born to a high-ranking mother outranks an adult born to a lower-ranking one, for life. That social complexity is part of what makes coordinated group hunting possible in the first place. Clan members recognize each other's rank and cooperate accordingly, which lets them take down prey that would be out of reach for any hyena hunting alone. What scavenging they do rely on takes advantage of a physical trait no other predator here can match. A spotted hyena's jaw can generate a bite force strong enough to crack open the load-bearing leg bones of an animal like a buffalo, reaching bone marrow and organ tissue that lions, leopards, and vultures are physically unable to access. In an ecosystem where every calorie is contested by multiple species, that is not a lesser skill picked up out of desperation. It is an entirely separate food source that nothing else in this landscape can compete with them for. Bone marrow is not the only resource other predators tend to avoid. Moving through that same grass, at ground level, is a bird that has built its entire hunting strategy around a category of prey most predators are built to leave alone: venomous snakes. The secretary bird is a long-legged bird of prey that hunts almost entirely on foot, covering up to 30 kilometers a day on a single patrol. Its signature technique is a short, explosive stamping strike, delivered with enough speed and force to kill a snake, including dangerously venomous species like cobras, before it has a real chance to strike back. Its legs are covered in unusually thick, overlapping scales, a layer of protection most other ground-hunting birds do not need, because most other ground-hunting birds are not going after prey that can kill them in return. Its name, according to one common explanation, comes from the loose black feathers at the back of its head, said to resemble the quill pen secretaries once tucked behind their ears. This is an example of what ecologists call niche partitioning. Rather than compete directly with lions, hyenas, and jackals over the same herds of grazing animals, the secretary bird has specialized in a food source that carries too much risk for most other predators to bother with. Specialization like this is one of the main reasons a single ecosystem can support so many different predators at once, without all of them starving each other out. Every animal in this chain, predator or prey, eventually dies, and every animal produces waste long before that. If nothing addressed either fact, the savanna would eventually be buried in both. That job, unglamorous as it is, belongs to one of the smallest animals in this entire ecosystem. A dung beetle can locate a fresh pile of dung within minutes of an animal producing it. Depending on the species, it will either shape a portion into a ball and roll it away in a nearly straight line, tunnel straight down and bury a supply directly beneath the pile, or simply move in and live inside it. All three strategies are aimed at the same goal, claiming dung before a rival does, and securing it before it dries out or is taken. For the beetles that roll their prize away, a straight path matters, since it is the fastest way to put distance between them and every other beetle converging on the same pile. For a long time, how they managed such precise navigation, often at night, was a genuine unanswered question in biology. Researchers eventually found the answer with an experiment conducted inside a planetarium. Dung beetles orient themselves using the Milky Way, reading the faint gradient of polarized light across the night sky the way a hiker might read a compass. They are among the only animals ever confirmed to navigate using the galaxy itself, rather than a single star, the moon, or a landmark. Their work matters for more than their own meals. By burying dung underground, dung beetles return nutrients directly to the soil, disperse the seeds hidden inside that dung, and reduce the breeding grounds available to disease-carrying flies. Multiply one beetle's small, deliberate effort by the billions of beetles working these planes at any given time, and the result is an entire, mostly invisible recycling system, the mechanism that eventually returns the energy the lioness failed to catch, the energy the wildebeest never spent, and the energy the hyena could not finish, back into the same ground the grass will use to start this cycle over again. Not every ecosystem returns its energy this openly, and not every ecosystem distributes sunlight this fairly in the first place. On the savanna, light reaches nearly every blade of grass more or less equally, which is a significant part of why this particular energy economy can support such enormous, open populations. Remove that open sky and stack the plants on top of each other instead, and the entire set of rules changes. Half the world away, in the Amazon basin, survival is no longer decided by who can out-hunt or out-hide everyone else. It comes down to who can reach the light first. In the Amazon basin, a single hectare of rainforest can hold more tree species than exist in all of North America, and every one of them is competing for the same thing, a share of sunlight that barely reaches the ground at all. As little as 2% of the light striking the canopy top ever makes it down to the forest floor. Whatever cannot get above that ceiling has to find another way to survive underneath it. At the very top of that competition sits the canopy itself, an interlocking ceiling of treetops, up to 40 meters above the ground, dense enough in places to move across without ever touching soil. It is also where one of the rainforest's most powerful predators hunts almost exclusively. The harpy eagle is one of the largest eagles alive, built for a very specific kind of hunting: short, explosive bursts of speed through dense, obstructed branches, not the long open sky gliding used by desert or grassland raptors. Its talons can exceed the size of a grizzly bear's claws, with a grip strength enough to crush the bones of the monkeys and sloths that make up most of its diet before they have any real chance to escape. Hunting through tangled branches at speed demands a different set of tools than hunting over open ground, and the harpy eagle's entire body has been shaped around one constraint: get it right on the first strike, because dense cover rarely allows for a second attempt. One of the animals most at risk from that first strike survives, somewhat paradoxically, by doing almost nothing at all. The three-toed sloth has one of the slowest metabolisms of any mammal on Earth, digesting a single leaf over the course of nearly a month. That slow-burning strategy means it needs very little food to survive, which matters enormously in a forest where the most nutritious leaves are scattered unpredictably across a three-dimensional canopy rather than concentrated in one place, the way grass is on open ground. That same stillness turns a sloth's fur into a small ecosystem of its own. Algae grows directly in grooves along each hair shaft, tinting the sloth faintly green and helping camouflage it against the canopy background. Specialized moths live nowhere else but in that fur, and when a sloth makes its once-a-week descent to the forest floor to defecate, at real risk from ground predators, those moths lay their eggs in the fresh dung before the sloth climbs back up. Their larvae develop there and later fly up to find a new sloth to colonize. Researchers studying the relationship have found that sloths carrying more moths also tend to carry more algae, and the leading hypothesis is that nitrogen released as the moths and their waste decompose helps fertilize that algae, meaning a sloth may be feeding, indirectly, on nutrients produced by a decomposition cycle happening in its own coat. Slowness, in other words, is not the absence of a strategy. It is the strategy: spend almost no energy, need almost no food, and let an entire miniature food web develop in the one resource a sloth keeps in abundant supply: time. Not every animal in this forest can afford to move this little. Some rely on stored power for a single, decisive moment instead. The green anaconda is among the heaviest snakes alive, and it hunts by constriction, wrapping around a prey animal and tightening its coils every time the prey exhales, until blood can no longer circulate. Contrary to a common assumption, an anaconda does not kill primarily by preventing breathing. Research using instrumented prey models found that constriction pressure is sufficient to stop blood flow and induce cardiac arrest within seconds to minutes, well before suffocation would take effect. Death, in most cases, comes from the heart stopping, not the lungs. Much of an anaconda's hunting happens in water, where its weight is supported and its approach can be nearly silent, and where many of its prey animals come to drink. Digesting a large kill can take weeks, during which an anaconda's heart, digestive organs, and metabolism temporarily enlarge to handle the load, then shrink back afterward. It is an extreme, energy-expensive strategy built around infrequent but enormous meals, the near opposite of the sloth's constant, minimal intake. Two animals in the same forest, solving the same problem of unpredictable food availability in almost perfectly opposite ways. Water gives the anaconda an advantage in stealth. For one of its neighbors in these same flooded forests, water is not just a hunting medium. It is the delivery system for the weapon itself. The electric eel is not a true eel but a knife fish, and roughly 80% of its body is composed of specialized cells stacked into columns that function like biological batteries. When hunting, it can discharge several hundred volts in a fraction of a second, enough to stun fish and briefly incapacitate anything unlucky enough to be nearby in the water. Researchers studying the behavior have documented something more precise than a simple shock. Electric eels can curl their bodies to concentrate the electric field around a specific target, effectively aiming the discharge, and can fire rapid double pulses that briefly and involuntarily activate the muscles of hidden prey, causing a telltale twitch that reveals its exact position even when fully concealed. It is a hunting system built entirely on electricity, in an environment where eyesight alone would be nearly useless. That same murky water connects the electric eel directly back to the forest above it. The trees blocking nearly all the sunlight from reaching the ground are the same trees whose fallen leaves stain the rivers below a deep, opaque brown. Competition for light at the canopy and the near-total loss of underwater visibility below it are, in this ecosystem, the same problem, playing out in two different mediums. If competition for light explains why so much energy in this forest never reaches the ground, one animal has found a way around that limit entirely, by building its own farm underground instead of waiting for anything to fall from above. Leafcutter ants do not eat the leaves they cut and carry, which can add up to several times their own body weight in a single trip. Instead, they carry the fragments back to an underground chamber, chew them into a pulp, and use that pulp to cultivate a specific species of fungus the colony depends on as its primary food source. The fungus, in turn, cannot survive in the wild without ants tending it, weeding out competing mold, and fertilizing it with the colony's own waste. Neither species has functioned independently of the other for tens of millions of years. A single mature colony can move more soil and organic material than almost any other animal in the forest besides humans, functioning as a kind of ecosystem engineer that aerates soil and redistributes nutrients across the forest floor. In effect, it converts sunlight already captured by leaves at the canopy into a food source that exists entirely out of the light. It is, in its own way, a solution to the same problem the harpy eagle, the sloth, the anaconda, and the electric eel have each solved differently: how to get enough energy in an environment where the sun itself is the thing being fought over. The leafcutter ant's answer is not to compete for sunlight at all, but to redirect it underground, after someone else has already captured it. Every strategy in this forest, however different, assumes one thing: that warmth itself is not the problem. In the Amazon, temperature rarely drops low enough to threaten survival on its own. The challenge is capturing enough food, not conserving enough heat. Remove that assumption completely, and an entirely different category of problem appears. At opposite ends of the planet, in the Arctic and the waters surrounding Antarctica, staying warm is not a side effect of survival. It is the central, unrelenting cost of it. On the sea ice above the Arctic Circle, a polar bear can remain motionless beside a seal's breathing hole for more than an hour, sometimes much longer, waiting for the exhale that means a seal below has surfaced to breathe. It is patience built on a hunting method with an extremely narrow success window. A seal that senses the bear in time will simply not surface at that hole again, and a bear that misses its strike may not eat again for days. Withstanding that kind of extended stillness in temperatures well below freezing depends on layered insulation few land mammals can match: a dense underfur trapping warm air close to the skin, an outer layer of guard hairs, and a thick layer of fat beneath both. The common assumption that this fur is white due to white pigment is incorrect. Each guard hair is actually translucent and hollow, and what looks white to the human eye is sunlight scattering through that hollow structure, the same optical effect that makes snow appear white. Underneath all of it, a polar bear's skin is black, helping absorb whatever heat does reach it. Sea ice itself is not incidental to this hunting method, it is the physical platform the entire strategy depends on. A bear hunting from solid ice has access to breathing holes it could never reach while swimming alone, since open water offers no fixed point to wait beside. Not every predator in this environment can rely on that much body fat and fur to manage the cold. Smaller animals lose heat far faster relative to their size and need a different solution entirely. The Arctic fox solves the same problem with a completely different mechanism, a network of blood vessels in its legs called a countercurrent heat exchange, where outgoing warm arterial blood runs directly alongside incoming cold venous blood, transferring heat between them before it can be lost to the surrounding air. This keeps the fox's core body temperature stable while allowing its paws to run several degrees colder without frostbite, since the tissue there is adapted to function normally at those lower temperatures. Combined with an exceptionally thick winter coat, this system lets an Arctic fox remain active in temperatures that would be lethal to most similarly sized mammals, with almost no measurable rise in its metabolic rate even as conditions drop far below freezing. Its coat also changes with the season, from brown or gray in summer to white in winter, tracking its surroundings rather than the temperature directly, a strategy built not for one climate held constant, like the polar bears, but for an environment that transforms completely twice a year. Camouflage matters far less to an animal too large for most predators to threaten in the first place. In the water beneath that same ice, one of the Arctic's largest residents finds food using a sense that has almost nothing to do with sight. Walruses feed primarily on clams and other mollusks buried in seafloor sediment, often in water too dark or silty for eyesight to be of much use. Instead, they rely on an extremely sensitive array of whiskers, called vibrissae, numbering in the hundreds, that detect the shape and texture of a buried shell through touch alone, then use suction, created by retracting the tongue inside a highly muscular mouth, to pull the soft body free. Their long tusks are commonly assumed to be digging tools used to unearth that same shellfish. Observational studies of feeding walruses have not supported that assumption. Excavation is done almost entirely by the whiskers and mouth suction just described. What the tusks are reliably used for is social signaling and dominance within a crowded haul-out group, and as mechanical leverage for pulling the animal's considerable body weight out of the water onto ice. Adult walruses, protected by a thick layer of blubber and by tusks capable of serious injury, are large enough that few polar bears risk hunting them directly. The bears that attempt it typically target vulnerable calves rather than full-grown adults, and even then, successful hunts are rare enough that walrus make up only a minor part of a polar bear's overall diet compared to seals. A walrus's blubber only has to buffer it against Arctic water. Half a world away, at the opposite pole, one animal endures cold on land as well as in water, for months at a time, in conditions with no real equivalent anywhere else on Earth. Emperor penguins breed during the Antarctic winter, when temperatures can fall below -40 degrees Celsius and winds can exceed 150 kilometers per hour, timed deliberately so that chicks hatch just as the brief summer food supply becomes available. To survive the incubation months in between, males, who alone incubate the single egg while females return to the ocean to feed, gather into huddles that can include thousands of individuals packed closely together. This is not social behavior in an emotional sense. It is a thermodynamic strategy. A huddle dramatically reduces each individual's body surface exposed to wind and cold, and the birds rotate positions continuously so that no single penguin is left on the exposed outer edge for an entire storm. Researchers tracking huddle movement have found that this rotation follows a fairly predictable wave-like pattern moving through the group, sharing the huddle's collective heat roughly evenly over time rather than concentrating it on whichever individuals happen to start in the center. Their second major adaptation applies underwater rather than on the ice. Emperor penguins are the deepest diving birds known, capable of descending several hundred meters and holding their breath for over 20 minutes on a single dive, made possible by an unusually high concentration of oxygen-storing myoglobin in their muscles, combined with a diving reflex that slows the heart rate dramatically and redirects blood away from non-essential organs toward the brain and heart specifically. That same frigid water hosts the ocean's most versatile apex predator, one whose hunting methods differ so much from one population to the next that researchers increasingly describe distinct orca populations as having their own distinct cultures. In the waters around Antarctica, some orca populations hunt seals resting on ice floes using a technique that requires precise coordination, swimming in a tight, synchronized line directly at the floe, then diving at the last moment to generate a wave large enough to wash over the ice and knock the seal into the water, where the rest of the group is waiting. This wave-washing behavior has to be learned rather than instinctive, since young orcas observed with hunting groups do not perform it correctly on their first attempts, improving only after repeated participation. That kind of learned, population-specific technique is part of why researchers increasingly avoid treating orcas as a single, behaviorally uniform species. Different populations specialize in entirely different prey and methods depending on where they live. Some hunt seals with this wave-washing method, others specialize in fish using an unrelated set of cooperative techniques, and some hunt marine mammals as large as whale calves. These differences are passed down within family groups across generations rather than being fixed by genetics alone, which is closer to what biologists mean by culture in a non-human animal than most other documented cases in the ocean. Every animal in this chapter has been solving a problem of too little heat, and in the water, too much of it being lost with every movement. At the opposite extreme of the planet's available conditions, in some of the driest deserts on Earth, heat is no longer the limiting resource. It arrives in dangerous excess. What becomes scarce instead, almost to the point of vanishing entirely, is water. In the Sahara, some regions receive less than 20 millimeters of rain in an average year, and in parts of the Atacama Desert in South America, among the driest places on Earth, some weather stations have never recorded measurable rainfall in the entire span of human observation. Under those conditions, the central challenge for any animal is not simply finding water. It is losing as little of it as possible, for as long as possible, between increasingly rare chances to replace it. That same scarcity of energy, established on the savanna, applies here as well. Deserts support far fewer large predators per unit area than richer ecosystems do, which is why most of what follows is a story of endurance rather than of the hunt. No desert animal illustrates that challenge, and the misconception surrounding it, better than the camel. Its hump does not store water, as is commonly believed. It stores fat, which can be metabolized for energy when food is scarce, and that process yields a small amount of water as a byproduct, though nowhere near enough to explain a camel's endurance on its own. The real explanation lies mostly in blood chemistry. A camel's red blood cells are oval rather than the disc shape found in most mammals, allowing them to keep flowing smoothly through blood vessels even as dehydration thickens the blood to a degree that would cause dangerous clotting in most other animals. A camel can lose a quarter or more of its body weight in water, rehydrate by drinking an extraordinary volume in a single sitting once water becomes available, and rebalance its blood chemistry afterward without the organ damage rapid rehydration would cause elsewhere. Its body also limits water loss before it happens. Kidneys that concentrate urine far more than most mammals manage, nasal passages that recapture moisture from every exhaled breath, and a core temperature allowed to fluctuate several degrees across a day rather than held constant, reducing how much water needs to be spent on sweating just to stay within a narrow range. Camels solve water scarcity by managing their own bodies more efficiently. Not every desert animal can rely on individual physiology alone. Some solve the same problem by building shared infrastructure instead. In the Kalahari, sociable weavers construct the largest nest structures of any bird, a single structure of grass and sticks that can house more than 100 breeding pairs at once, maintained and expanded across generations for decades. The design functions less like a collection of individual nests and more like an apartment structure with a thick, lead thatch roof, insulating the interior chambers against both extreme daytime heat and surprisingly cold desert nights, keeping conditions inside more stable than the outside air across the full daily swing. That structure attracts more than its builders. Pygmy falcons, the smallest birds of prey in Africa, nest almost exclusively within active weaver colonies, using chambers the weavers built rather than constructing their own. Rather than pure parasitism, researchers studying the relationship have documented a more balanced exchange. The falcons do occasionally prey on weaver chicks, but their presence also appears to deter snakes and other predators from approaching the colony at all, at a rate that offsets those losses. The result is not a clean case of either enemy or ally, but something closer to a coexistence where both costs and benefits run in both directions. For the weavers, and the falcons nesting alongside them, the considerable cost of building and maintaining a structure this large is repaid through a resource this desert makes as scarce as water, shelter stable enough to avoid spending unnecessary energy on temperature regulation at all. Shelter reduces how much a weaver colony loses to temperature regulation. It does nothing to solve the more basic problem facing a small, solitary reptile with no colony to retreat into: how to get water into its body in the first place, where standing water may not exist for months. The thorny devil, a small, heavily spined lizard native to Central Australia, has evolved a mechanism for collecting water that does not require drinking in any conventional sense. Its skin is covered in microscopic grooves that draw moisture from any source it contacts, whether dew condensing overnight or an isolated patch of damp sand, and route that moisture along its body directly to the corners of its mouth through capillary action, the same physical process that lets a paper towel draw up a spill. Standing in damp sand for even a short time is enough for a thorny devil to rehydrate almost entirely through its skin. That same spined exterior, its most visually distinctive feature, doubles as a defense, discouraging predators from swallowing an animal covered in sharp, irregular points, and it carries a smaller, false head-like lump on the back of its neck. When threatened, a thorny devil tucks its actual head down between its front legs and presents that false lump instead, a strategy researchers describe as most likely intended to direct a predator's strike toward a less vulnerable part of the body, though the exact survival benefit has proven easier to observe than to measure directly. Thorny devils harvest whatever moisture happens to contact their skin. In the Namib Desert, on Africa's southwestern coast, one insect has gone further, engineering its own body shape to actively harvest water from fog that would otherwise simply blow past. Some darkling beetle species climb to the crest of sand dunes at dawn, when fog rolling in from the cold Atlantic coast is most likely to form, and tilt their bodies at a specific angle into the wind, a behavior researchers call fog basking. Their bumpy shell surface is arranged so that condensing water droplets collect on hydrophilic bumps, merge into larger droplets, and roll down water-repellent channels between those bumps directly to the beetle's mouth, extracting drinkable water from air that contains no rain at all. The mechanism has been studied closely enough that engineers have used it as a direct model for fog harvesting materials designed to collect drinking water in other arid regions, an unusually direct case of a desert adaptation informing human technology rather than the reverse. In a desert that can go years without meaningful rainfall, fog driven inland from the cold ocean current offshore functions as a more reliable water source than rain itself. Every animal in this chapter so far has adapted to a desert with no standing water at all. A small number of fish species have adapted to the opposite, rarer problem, surviving in isolated desert water that does exist, but under conditions almost no other fish could tolerate. In scattered springs and pools across the deserts of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico, remnants of much larger lakes that dried up thousands of years ago, several species of pupfish survive in water that can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, carry salinity higher than seawater, and hold oxygen levels low enough to be lethal to most freshwater fish. Because many of these populations have been isolated from one another for thousands of generations, in habitats as small as a single spring-fed pool a few meters across, several are now recognized as distinct species found nowhere else on Earth, some numbering only in the hundreds of individuals. Their situation illustrates a principle found throughout this film in different forms: isolation, whether created by a shrinking desert lake, an ocean basin, or 1,000 meters of open water, does not just threaten survival. Over a long enough timescale, it is one of the primary engines that produces new species in the first place. Every strategy in this desert, whether physiological, architectural, or evolutionary, has been a response to scarcity and isolation: too little water, too little shelter, too little contact with other populations to stay genetically connected. Not every environment on Earth enforces scarcity this directly. In the shallow, sunlit waters of a coral reef, resources are abundant enough to support more species per square meter than almost anywhere else in the ocean. There, the central problem is no longer how to survive with too little. It is how to survive in close, constant contact with almost everything else trying to survive in the same small space. A coral reef is a structure built slowly, over centuries, by tiny coral polyps that secrete calcium carbonate skeletons and host photosynthetic algae directly inside their own tissue, algae that supplies the coral with most of its energy in exchange for shelter and access to sunlight. That single partnership, between an animal and a plant-like organism living inside it, is the energy foundation the entire reef community depends on, and it sets the tone for nearly everything living here. On a reef, survival is rarely a story of one species acting alone. Clownfish live among the tentacles of sea anemones, structures whose stinging cells would harm most other fish that brushed against them. A clownfish's skin is coated in a thick layer of mucus that prevents those stinging cells from firing, a protection researchers believe develops partly through direct acclimation, with young clownfish gradually building up protective mucus through repeated, careful contact with a specific host anemone before taking up permanent residence. In exchange for shelter, a resident clownfish defends its anemone from at least some fish that would otherwise eat it, chases off some parasites, and its waste provides a small, measurable source of nutrients directly to its host. Neither partner depends on the other absolutely. Anemones without resident clownfish do exist and survive, typically with reduced growth rates and higher predation, evidence that the relationship, while not strictly required, meaningfully improves the odds for both. Clownfish protect one specific anemone. A short distance away, at a fixed location on the reef known as a cleaning station, another small fish has built an entire livelihood around servicing dozens of different species rather than partnering with just one. Cleaner wrasses remove parasites, dead skin, and mucus from client fish visiting their stations, including species many times their own size that could easily eat them, and in most encounters, do not. Client fish appear to actively seek out these stations and will wait in a kind of queue, and researchers studying cleaning stations have documented clients adjusting their own behavior, including holding fins open or remaining unusually still, in ways that appear to signal a willingness to be cleaned rather than eaten. The relationship is not purely peaceful. Cleaner wrasses occasionally cheat by biting off a piece of healthy mucus or tissue rather than only removing parasites, a snack more nutritious than parasites alone, and studies tracking repeated interactions have found that client fish respond to being cheated by chasing the offending cleaner or avoiding that station afterward, effectively punishing bad service. Cleaners that cheat too often measurably lose future business, and researchers studying this dynamic have described it as one of the clearest documented examples of a market-like economy of trust operating between two different species in the wild, complete with cheating, punishment, and reputational consequences. That system of trust depends on client fish being able to sense, in the first place, when a cleaner is nearby rather than a predator. Some of the reef's actual predators rely on a sense with no equivalent in the fish they hunt at all. Reef sharks possess an organ system called the ampullae of Lorenzini, hundreds of small, jelly-filled pores concentrated around the snout, each capable of detecting extremely weak electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of nearby animals, including prey completely hidden beneath sand. This sense is sensitive enough that a reef shark can locate prey producing no visible movement, sound, or scent at all, using only the faint bioelectric signature every living muscle cannot help but produce. It becomes most useful in the final, close-range moment of a hunt, when a shark's other senses would ordinarily struggle to pinpoint an exact location, solving, from the predator's side, a version of the same challenge the electric eel exploits from an entirely different angle in the rainforest, detecting what cannot be seen, by reading an electrical signature. Detecting an electrical field is one way to sense what the eye alone would miss. On the same reef, one small crustacean has taken visual sensing itself further than almost any other animal alive. Mantis shrimp possess compound eyes containing up to 16 types of photoreceptors, compared to 3 in humans, along with the ability to detect polarized light, including circularly polarized light, a capability confirmed in very few other studied animals. Despite this extraordinary hardware, research into how their brains process that information suggests they may not perceive a wider range of distinguishable colors than humans do. The leading hypothesis is that their visual system processes color information faster, through simpler direct comparisons between receptor types rather than blending signals the way human vision does, trading nuance for speed. Their other defining feature is an entirely different kind of adaptation, a raptorial claw capable of striking with such acceleration that the claw moves faster than water can fill the space behind it, creating a cavitation bubble that collapses with enough force to stun or kill prey even if the initial strike misses entirely. The strike has been measured moving fast enough to generate a brief flash of light and heat from the collapsing bubble, a phenomenon called sonoluminescence, making it one of the fastest, most forceful strikes documented in the animal kingdom relative to the animal's size. Not every reef resident is built for speed or precision striking. Some of the reef's most consistent visitors instead rely on a sense with no clear equivalent in human experience, one that lets them return, across thousands of kilometers of open ocean, to the exact stretch of coastline where they themselves hatched. Green sea turtles migrate thousands of kilometers between feeding grounds and nesting beaches, and mature females typically return to nest on or near the same beach where they emerged from the sand decades earlier. The leading explanation is magnetoreption. Turtles appear to sense subtle variations in the Earth's magnetic field and use them as a kind of positional map, with hatchlings potentially imprinting on the specific magnetic signature of their natal beach before ever leaving it. This remains, by researchers' own description, a leading hypothesis rather than a fully settled mechanism. The precise biological structure responsible for detecting magnetic fields in turtles has not been conclusively identified, even though the navigational behavior itself has been documented repeatedly through tagging and tracking studies. What is well established is the outcome. A green sea turtle spends most of its life grazing on seagrass meadows near a reef, then, roughly once every 2 to 4 years, undertakes a migration whose accuracy over open ocean, with no visible landmarks for most of the journey, remains one of the more striking examples of long-distance animal navigation confirmed anywhere in nature. Every relationship on this reef, competitive or cooperative, still depends on one resource none of these animals ever have to think about: sunlight, reaching the coral within the first few tens of meters of the surface, powering the entire structure from below. Descend far enough beneath the surface of the open ocean, and that resource disappears completely, along with almost every assumption that depended on it. Sunlight penetrates clearly lit ocean water to a depth of only around 200 meters, a boundary marine scientists call the photic zone. Below that point, photosynthesis becomes impossible, and by a depth of 1,000 meters, the ocean is in complete and permanent darkness. Yet the deep ocean is not empty. It simply runs on rules that do not require the sun at all, beginning with one of its largest and most frequent visitors. Sperm whales can dive beyond 1,000 meters and remain submerged for well over an hour, hunting almost entirely by sound in water with no light to see by. They locate prey using echolocation, generating some of the loudest sounds produced by any animal on Earth inside an organ in their head called the spermaceti organ, then listening for the echo bouncing off prey, primarily large squid, in the water ahead. Diving this deep and this long requires physiological adjustments. Most mammals do not have collapsible rib cages that let the lungs compress fully rather than rupture under pressure, blood and muscle tissue capable of storing unusually large reserves of oxygen, and a heart rate that slows dramatically during a dive to conserve that oxygen for the organs that need it most. For most of scientific history, the animal a sperm whale dives this deep specifically to hunt was known almost entirely through indirect evidence. Giant squid can exceed 12 meters in total length, yet for centuries the primary evidence of their existence came from carcasses that washed ashore or floated to the surface, and from circular sucker scars on the skin of sperm whales that had clearly survived encounters with something enormous. It was not until 2012 that researchers filmed a giant squid alive in its natural deep-sea habitat for the first time, using a specially designed, low-light camera system built to avoid disturbing the animal with bright lights or loud equipment. Much of what makes a giant squid difficult to observe is also what makes it difficult for a sperm whale to catch: extremely large eyes, among the largest in the animal kingdom, built to detect faint bioluminescent flashes and approaching silhouettes in near-total darkness, combined with a fast escape response triggered by a giant nerve fiber that transmits signals faster than ordinary nerve tissue, allowing a near-instant full-body contraction away from a threat. The relationship between these two animals, one large enough to leave scars, one that dives specifically to search for it, is one of the few predator-prey relationships on Earth in which both species can genuinely threaten each other, and in which most of what is known comes from evidence left behind rather than the encounter itself ever being directly observed. Not every deep-sea hunter relies on speed or size to catch prey in the dark. Some rely on making the darkness work against the animals hunting through it by offering a light of their own. Deep-sea anglerfish attract prey using a modified spine extending forward from the head, tipped with a bulb containing bioluminescent bacteria living in symbiosis with the fish. The bacteria receive a stable environment and steady nutrients, and the anglerfish receives a living lure it does not have to power on its own. In near-total darkness, that small, controlled point of light can draw in prey from a considerable distance, prey with no other visual reference to judge what it is actually approaching. Many deep-sea anglerfish species have an equally unusual reproductive strategy. In several species, males are dramatically smaller than females, and upon finding a mate in the vast darkness of the deep ocean, a male will bite into her body and gradually fuse with her circulatory system, eventually losing his own eyes and internal organs and surviving as a permanent, parasitic source of sperm. Given how rarely two anglerfish are likely to encounter each other at all in an environment this dark and sparsely populated, researchers studying the species propose that this permanent fusion solves a specific problem, once a mate is finally found, never needing to find one again. Anglerfish still depend, indirectly, on food that originated at the surface, prey that fed on other prey, that fed on organic material eventually descending from sunlit water above. Around certain deep-sea vents, an entirely different food web exists that owes nothing to the sun at all. At hydrothermal vents, cracks in the ocean floor where seawater seeps into the Earth's crust, becomes superheated, and rises back out carrying dissolved chemicals including hydrogen sulfide. Giant tube worms grow in dense colonies despite having no mouth, no digestive tract, and no way to eat in any conventional sense. Instead, they host colonies of bacteria inside a specialized internal organ, and those bacteria convert the chemicals in vent water into usable energy through a process called chemosynthesis, oxidizing hydrogen sulfide rather than relying on sunlight the way photosynthesis does. The worm absorbs nutrients produced by its own internal bacterial colony directly, subcontracting its entire energy production to a partner organism it cannot survive without. This is the one confirmed example, among every animal in this film, of an ecosystem functioning on an energy source with no connection to the sun whatsoever. Every other environment covered so far, no matter how extreme, from the deepest dive of a sperm whale to the bioluminescent lure of an anglerfish, has still ultimately traced its energy back to sunlight captured somewhere, by something, at some point in the chain. Life clustered around a hydrothermal vent answers the central question of this entire film in a way nothing else does. It does not need the sun's energy at all, because the Earth itself, through basic geothermal chemistry, is generating an energy source of its own. Even here, though, sunlight has not vanished completely from the picture. It arrives indirectly, in a much stranger form, whenever something enormous, already introduced in this film, finally dies. When a large whale dies and sinks to the ocean floor, it can create what marine biologists call a whalefall, a single carcass massive enough to support an entire, localized ecosystem for decades. Scavengers strip the soft tissue within the first months or years. What follows afterward is slower and stranger. Bacteria break down the fat saturating the whale's skeleton, releasing hydrogen sulfide in a process similar to what powers the hydrothermal vent community just described, and an entire chemosynthetic food web can develop around a single set of bones, sometimes persisting for decades before the skeleton is fully consumed. Among the specialized animals that colonize whale bones are worms in the genus Osedax, which have no mouth or digestive system of their own. instead using root-like structures to bore directly into the bone and host bacteria that break down the fat stored inside, absorbing the products of the digestion much as a tube worm does at a hydrothermal vent. Female Ozdax worms house microscopic males, sometimes dozens at once, permanently inside their own bodies, an arrangement that ensures reproduction remains possible even in the extremely low-density, unpredictable environment of a single sunken whale skeleton, isolated from any other whale fall by what is typically many kilometers of empty seafloor. A whale, across its entire life, is a direct product of sunlight. It fed on krill, which fed on phytoplankton, which converted sunlight into energy the same way grass does on the open savanna, a continent and an ocean away. In death, that same whale becomes something closer to what the tube worms rely on, a source of chemical energy sustaining a food web with no direct relationship to the sun at all. The same animal spends its life running on solar energy and its death running on chemistry, closing, in a single skeleton on the ocean floor, both of the two energy systems this film has followed for 3 hours. That single image, an animal built by sunlight, sustaining an ecosystem built on its absence, is as good a place as any to end this journey, and to return, one last time, to where it began. Not long ago, this film opened on a lioness, motionless in tall grass, waiting on a single wildebeest that had drifted too far from its herd. That same moment has played out, in some form, in every world since, in a sloth's decision to spend almost no energy at all, in a dung beetle reading the galaxy to find its way home, in a whale skeleton feeding a community of worms that will not see sunlight for the rest of their lives. None of these 30 animals are unusual for facing that rule. Every living thing on this planet, without exception, is running the same calculation the lioness was running in the very first scene: take in more energy than you spend, for one more day, and pass on whatever traits made that possible. What is unusual, if anything, is how differently the same rule can be answered. A camel answers it through blood chemistry. An orca answers it through culture, passed from one generation to the next. A tube worm answers it by partnering with bacteria that can build energy out of chemistry the sun had no part in at all. There is no ecosystem on Earth, however extreme, that has found a way around that rule entirely. There is only an almost endless variety of ways to obey it, each one shaped by millions of years spent in one particular place, under one particular set of constraints, refined by every failed attempt that came before it. Somewhere right now, on a plain, in a forest, beneath the ice, or 4 kilometers down in total darkness, that same calculation is happening again. It has been happening, in one form or another, for longer than there have been eyes to witness it, and it will keep happening long after this particular telling of it ends. This was only one version of that story, told across 6 worlds and 30 lives. The story itself is still being written, in real time, everywhere on Earth, including in the exact patch of grass where a lioness, right now, has just gone still again.